Okay, so if you are dealing with chronic pain, this episode is for you. No matter what joint it's in, no matter the degree, there are so many things that are tied to chronic pain that research is coming out, and we're learning more and more about the condition. That it's not necessarily all about movement, it's not necessarily all about exercise. There are so many other things that can contribute to chronic pain. Especially when it comes to osteoarthritis, it's so much more than genetics. You can actually impact your pain levels. You can find relief and go out and adventure and do the things you want to. And today we are going to be diving into what the research is saying about chronic pain and some other avenues that you can explore to help find relief, especially if you maybe haven't been finding answers about your pain or feel like you've been struggling to move forward in pain relief and are kind of stuck in a rut along your journey and are really wondering where to go next. I have a friend here who I met actually on Instagram, but he is a physical therapist as well and has lots of other certifications in nutrition and mindfulness. So he comes to us very well-rounded. And I'm so excited for this conversation with Dr. Joe Tatta. And so if you could just give us a little bit of information kind of about your journey through physical therapy and how you came to help people with chronic pain.
Sure. Hi, Alyssa. It's great to join you, and it's great to be here and meet your community. I'm excited to chat with everyone. I have been a physical therapist since 1995, so probably just a little bit longer than you have, Alyssa.
A little bit.
But I really came into this profession with a background in sports and athletics like you did. But I also had a family member who was struggling with chronic pain. And I watched how they suffered and they struggled and they could not find really any good answers from the major medical system. And I also watched her, this is my mom actually, I also watched her kind of heal and recover naturally. Okay. So she didn't have surgery. She did not take medication. She did not have any type of injections. She really just started doing her own research and made her own discoveries, and slowly but surely reversed and completely cured her chronic pain, as well as her anxiety and other things that went along with that. So I had this kind of, the influence was both a personal influence as well as kind of a professional interest in the human body, and specifically in how we can cure and treat pain.
Yeah, and I think that that's awesome. And I know that there's the information, and even in healthcare and in the professionals that we're seeing, hopefully, we're moving kind of into this more holistic approach. That it's not, just about your symptoms. It's not just about the medical conditions that you have. And it's not just about like your pain on a scale of 1 to 10. It's looking into more of sleep habits and looking into all of these other things. And I mean, I meet people all the time who, when we're talking about some of these things, it's like, I had no idea that stress could manage or contribute to my pain, and all of these other things start to kind of click. So what are some of the main things from your perspective that you find can impact chronic pain the most?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question because it really starts to point us toward the idea that the whole person is important when we're helping people recover and reverse their chronic pain, right? So, of course, when you have pain, the symptom of pain is important. We don't ignore that. We keep that in mind, and it's important that we know where the pain is and how that pain acts. But you're not just a knee joint, and you're not just a hip joint, or you're not just a lower back, right? You even see these things on prescriptions like, patient has low back pain. And really what the evidence and the research is really pointing toward is that we should take a whole person approach to the recovery of pain. Now, that whole person approach is different depending on who the person is, of course. That's the most important part, and what their condition may be. But there are various factors that influence chronic pain and our ability to recover from chronic pain. So I think probably the most important one to start with is, what is someone's knowledge about what pain is and what their condition is?
Sure.
And And at first, people are a little bit like, well, you're the expert. You're the one who knows about you understand arthritis intimately. You went to school, you studied anatomy and bones and joints. And we did, and we know those things. But a big part of what I do, and of course, a big part of what you do, Alyssa, is that we empower people, right? The knowledge that we share on interviews like this and the knowledge that we share on our social media channels and our newsletters is really about empowerment. So we want to share as much knowledge as we have about pain with you, the person who's struggling, because the research shows that the more you know, the more likely it is that you'll recover from pain.
Sure.
That research also shows that the more you know, that information that you can learn and you grasp onto as someone who's living with pain, it actually helps to alleviate your fear and your worry and your anxiety. And when we use that knowledge and we empower you, that empowerment leads to that decrease in fear and anxiety and worry. And with that, it actually helps to alleviate your pain. So that's why I love doing things like this, because this is really what like the first session of working with me is like. Let's get to know you, the whole person. And then let's start to just talk about the little bits and pieces that might be missing from your knowledge base around what pain is and what you can actually do on your own to cure it and to alleviate it.
And I think that that's really important because a lot of times when people go in for, say, knee pain, they are given an x-ray of their knee and, they move it and talk about it a little bit. But then it's okay, lose weight and exercise, and then you're gone. There is almost little to no information, or it could be information along the wear and tear theory and those sorts of things that can actually help or can actually increase that fear and increase some of that. And so when we're kind of talking about what pain is, there is some research, I'm sure you're familiar, that pain is not particularly tied to like structural damage. Because a lot of times people say, I have pain doing this, so I'm going to stop it because I'm probably making my joint worse. How do you kind of navigate that? Just briefly, how would you kind of explain that to somebody on a surface level?
Yeah, it's a great question. So people come to me all the time with images of their knee or their hip joint, and they say, here's the MRI or the X-ray. Take a look at it. And I do. I look at it because it's important, right? We have to make sure that there's no infection or there's not a fracture there. So we rule those things out, right? Check those boxes off. That's fine. That's not the cause of the pain, right? Then, really, what I say is this picture is important, right? We look at it together, but there's a whole body attached to your knee, right?
Yes.
There are other parts of your body that move. And there's also a nervous system that is responsible for that movement. And there's a nervous system that's responsible for how you respond when you move. And I think how you respond when you move is the most important part, because oftentimes people go to a physician specifically and they're showed the x-ray and they say, oh, you have degeneration in there. The cartilage is breaking down. There's wear and tear. Now, your nervous system responds to that with fear and anxiety and worry. And the truth is, we know from many, many studies that those pictures are really just a snapshot or an image in time. And it doesn't represent your entire nervous system. So we start to work on ways to quiet that nervous system. And education really is the place to do that. So for example, if you're someone out there right now listening and you have knee osteoarthritis, how many people do you know that might be, let's say 10, maybe 20, even 20 years older than you, that might have knee arthritis also, but are living a very active life? So we start to see that there are people that have these images of their knee, that some people have extreme pain and some people have no pain. So the image really doesn't have a whole lot to do with how we feel, how we respond to it, our fear level, the level of fear that we have around our movement and our activities, or the worry that we put into that pain on a daily basis actually has a lot more to do with our pain than that static image. And oftentimes that's where we start. And that's, as you know, Alyssa, that's a lot to unpack right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
People start to think, well, what this person is really saying is that my brain has an influence on my perception of pain, right? So our brain, or our brain is obviously the organ, our nervous system, or all the nerves that are attached to it.
Yeah.
If we can help orient people's awareness to the idea that, okay, I have to move my knee and I have to make my knee stronger and more flexible, that's of course important. But it's also important of when I'm starting to move my knee and when I'm starting to stretch it and exercise it, how do I respond to that? If I respond with fear, then it kind of turns the pain dial up. If I respond with curiosity, and oh, it's interesting how that knee is a little bit tighter on this side and that knee is a little bit weaker, I guess I need to strengthen it and stretch it, then that starts to turn down that pain dial and obviously leads to recovery.
Yes, and I think a big part of that is confidence. And
Yeah.
that's why, like, if you are listening and do have osteoarthritis in any degree, it's looking at what you've been searching for as far as pain relief goes. If you're looking for, the best exercise for pain relief or the best foods, etc., there could be a glaring gap in your journey to pain relief. And it could be why you're not particularly seeing relief, because it's that education part. It's that understanding what osteoarthritis is in the first place. And unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation out there. You can get misinformation from family, from friends. Hearing all of these things then feed into and fuel that fear. Then your body's working on overdrive. You're in constant pain, sleep suffers, etc. And so then it kind of goes down this path. So I think that's a really, really important, just highlighting the importance of information. Now, obviously, that's not the most sexy thing about finding pain relief. Okay, searching for information on osteoarthritis, but it really can be so, so powerful. And kind of moving into a couple of other things that can influence chronic pain. I know you talk a lot about nutrition. And so, how, in your perspective, how does nutrition contribute to chronic pain? And then, how can we use nutrition to help alleviate some of that?
Yeah, nutrition is a major contributor to chronic pain, both in the pain turning on, as well as having the ability to turn that pain off. And just think, um, when people come to us as physical therapists, we start them on an exercise program. Obviously, oftentimes people aren't exercising, so you have to develop that habit of exercising. What's great about nutrition is that people are eating 3 times a day already, right? So there's already an opportunity. You already have a habit built into your lifestyle every day, 3 times a day, that can turn down that intensity of pain. Now, of course, it has to be foods that are health promoting, foods that are nutritious, foods that are anti-inflammatory, and all those things, food that are nutrient dense, foods that are anti-inflammatory, have the ability to decrease or alleviate your pain. So what's fun about food is that we all eat, we all like and we all enjoy food. And food is a part of our lifestyle and our social structure. So it's a great way to start to use that as part of pain rehabilitation. I think the anti-inflammatory component is really the easiest place to start. There are foods that are inflammatory, that'll increase inflammation in your body, throughout your entire body, including your nervous system and including your joints. And there are foods that are anti-inflammatory, that'll lower inflammation throughout your nervous system. And we know that with chronic pain, there is inflammation in the nervous system. It's actually called neuroinflammation. And we have lots of different studies now that show that different types of diets actually have a really good impact on lowering inflammation in our nervous system. So that's the good news for people, is that anti-inflammatory, pro-inflammatory, you have the ability to place those anti-inflammatory foods or nutrients or entire meals into your life. And when you do that, it helps to alleviate pain.
Yeah, and it can play such a big role because you are getting a lot of repetitions throughout the day, and it's Also, if you've only been sticking with exercise and trying even the best exercises out there, but still aren't finding relief, that we start to have to look at other avenues, and food is a big one just because it's a big part of our lives. I know a lot of people can get overwhelmed looking for, what are the exact foods that I should be eating? What should I not be eating? So how do you typically approach maybe starting out on a anti-inflammatory type of eating? What are maybe like a step or two that somebody listening could start with right now?
Yeah, the first place I really start is with what they're currently eating, because all of us are eating foods that are health promoting. It's very rare to find someone that's not eating any food that is going to help them. So looking at someone's diet and saying, okay, what do you eat on a daily basis that contributes to health? And typically those foods obviously contribute to pain relief also. So for example, if someone says, well, I typically have a salad with chicken for lunch. So I start there and I say, great, what's on that salad? And we start to break down obviously the component of that meal. So we know that green leafy vegetables are anti-inflammatory. Can you work in some more green leafy vegetables into your diet? What are you dressing your salad with? They might say, oh, creamy ranch dressing. And I might say, well, that's nice, that's delicious. But just so you know, olive oil is a wonderful way to dress your salad, and olive oil is extremely anti-inflammatory. And if you start using, let's say, 2 tablespoons of olive oil with any type of really vinegar that you like, it can really lower inflammation in your body. What's the protein that you put on that salad? They say, well, I usually use chicken. Chicken's great. Continue to do that, let's say, twice a week. How about we also put some salmon or some shrimp on there? Or maybe another type of fish like cod, which is very anti-inflammatory. They have a lot of those, the seafood, the fish have inflammatory fats in them, anti-inflammatory fats in them. So fats are good. We need fats. Your nervous system is about 60% fat. So if we can add anti-inflammatory fats into your diet, olives, olive oil, cold water fish, nuts and seeds, avocado oil, even coconut and coconut oil, those fats really help bring down the inflammation in your nervous system. It also even helps nerves regenerate. So if you're dealing with any type of neurodegenerative condition, it can really help with that as well. So really looking at someone's diet and saying, where are the opportunities to maximize or optimize what you're already doing is a really good place to start. So I'd like to start there because, as you know, Alyssa, when you go online, a lot of things, don't eat this, take this out of your diet. And there definitely is a place for that, and we can talk about that. But the most important part is what can we put into the diet that will help nourish your joints and your nervous system. The number one, believe it or not, the number one place I start with so many people are missing is really just hydration. Just basic water intake. People start their day with caffeine. Middle of the day, there's more caffeine, and they're ending their day maybe with some alcohol. All of that is dehydrating to your body. So think of like, something that's shriveled up and dehydrated. The same thing actually happens in our body with our tissues, all of our tissues. So just getting a big bottle of water, having it at your desk or having it around your house, and sipping that water throughout the day so you can hydrate your body is a wonderful way to bring the most essential nutrient into your joints, which is water.
Absolutely. And I think it's important taking a step back for a second, looking at, I think a lot of times we tend to, or media and things tend to demonize foods like never eat this or, cut out sugar and all these things. So then whenever somebody has one of those, then it's like you feel guilty and all of these things. But it's instead looking at like what we can include, like you said, to maximize what you're already doing. And then we can have a little bit of moderation of other things, but it's including more instead of starting to take away things too early. I feel like that just plays on us a little bit more psychologically, that it's not necessarily never eat this, and if you do, you're failing. It's let's just include a little bit more so that way we can just maximize kind of what you're already doing.
Yeah,
And also,
what's nice about that approach is when you're increasing the fruits and vegetables in your diet, which we know are health promoting. when you're increasing the healthy fats in your diet, when you're increasing the lean protein and the whole carbohydrates in your diet, things like quinoa and brown rice, what it does over time is naturally, without a practitioner having to tell you, it starts to push out the foods that are not so good for you. And you realize that, oh, you know what? Last night I had a big candy bar, right? And I noticed that, my fingers feel a little bit more stiff today, or my knee is a little more swollen than it was. So the person on their own makes the connection to, wow, there's something in that candy bar. Okay, what's in the candy bar? There's sugar in the candy bar, right? There's a lot of sugar in the candy bar, as well as other things that are anti-inflammatory. But they realized that, okay, that candy bar did not make me feel good, but the, you know, kale salad I had with salmon and olive oil and some blueberries and some quinoa mixed into it actually made me feel better. So on their own, they realize it's kind of their own positive reinforcement. They realize, wow, here's what works for my body and my health, and here's what doesn't work for my body and my health. And like you said, we all have a little bit of sugar in our diet, but I think the key there is it's a little bit. And if we look at our entire diet on a weekly basis, it's probably less than 10%, because what we're doing day in and day out is health promoting, versus just that little bit of sugar isn't going to hurt you if that's the way you're eating most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just kind of making these simple approaches instead of just kind of going all in into trying to be perfect and trying to follow all these things and only eat these foods and avoid these, because that can be really frustrating and it can be really hard to sustain. And that's
Yeah.
what it is. It's all about sustainability. Everything we've kind of talked about up until this point is making small changes to create a more sustainable environment for your body. And I think absolutely taking those small steps towards understanding what makes you feel good and what doesn't, then you can start, because nobody wants to feel bad.
Yeah.
So it's then taking those correct steps. But sometimes it can be hard to kind of figure out what those steps are, just because everybody's going to respond differently. And so I think that that's also important, is doing a little bit of trial and error yourself, just being aware of maybe if you do have increased pain, looking back and saying, oh, what did I eat or what did I change? That is then going to, you can maybe tie some things to increased pain.
Yeah, and obviously people do have food intolerances that contribute to their chronic pain, especially people who have osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis. So those are important. And obviously when you work with a practitioner one-on-one, you can work through those. But a lot of people, I have an aunt who has rheumatoid arthritis, and when she eats eggplant, which is common, I'm Italian, which is a common vegetable in the Italian cuisine, she realizes that her fingers start to hurt, become achy and a little bit swollen. She discovered that on her own. No doctor told her that. I didn't tell her that. She discovered on her own. She said, yeah, I just took it out of my diet. And, I don't really miss it too much. I have squash instead of, green squash instead of eggplant. She makes like a green squash Parmesan instead of an eggplant Parmesan. And it works for her. So people discover these things on their own. It's always nice to have a practitioner who can explain it to you and help you kind of go one step further.
Yeah, I actually have a patient who her knees flare up with Brussels sprouts.
Oh, interesting.
She actually just found out on her own too. And so it's not always these like glaring foods. It could be, other things, but it's just making those substitutions and then figuring out how your body best responds.
Yeah.
So when it comes to chronic pain and it comes to finding these other avenues for relief and really kind of going at this holistic approach, what are maybe 1 to 2 things that someone could leave this episode thinking about or initiating in their life to start to find relief?
Yeah, I think for the first, and we mentioned this earlier, is fear. That's really, we talk a lot, there's a lot of research on how emotions impact our pain. And fear is the number one emotion that impacts your pain. And most of that is around fear of movement or fear of re-injury. Mm-hmm. So kind of maybe rewinding a little bit and just listening to what we talked about in the beginning, and just knowing that when you have chronic pain, you're not, for the vast majority of people with chronic pain conditions. You are not in danger of damaging your body if you move. And starting to work with that and being curious about that and really sending yourself this kind of signal of safety, really, that it's okay to move your body. And if you can do that, the fear will decrease and you'll be able to move obviously more freely and with less pain. So that one emotion of fear is the place I send people. Two, we mentioned diet. We talked about diet a lot. So finding really a style or a pattern of eating that really works for you is important because you're doing that 3 times a day. And all of us can work on our diet and nutrition. And when we do, we feel better both in our mind as well as our body. Of course, your body's going to feel better. You're going to have less pain, but oftentimes you sleep better and you have less anxiety. So nutrition is really related to that. The third one really is finding a buddy. Finding someone who is going through something similar. They don't have to have the exact same chronic pain condition you have or the exact severity, but finding a buddy, finding a partner who is going through something similar and can hold you accountable to what you're going through. You can hold them accountable and you start to learn from each other. Because there's a lot to learn here, right? Even today, even the small amount of time that we've spoken today, Alyssa, we've covered a lot of information. We've covered a lot of ground, right? So having a buddy, having someone you can go through this with is a tremendous support system. And when you start to compare notes and you start to share recipes and you start to talk about the exercise and activity that you did and how you responded to it is really one of the best ways. Some of the research really is pointing to peer. It's what they call peer buddies. But having a peer or having a friend or a buddy is a great way to work through this process because pain recovery or pain relief is a process. It takes a little bit of time, takes knowledge, as we mentioned before, and it does take a little bit of change on your part. But as you change and as you and your buddy change, your pain will change as well.
Absolutely. And now that, social media has expanded and there are all sorts of, and now virtual things are much more commonplace than they were. There are all sorts of different avenues for support, whether it is one-on-one, if you can find someone that you can, exercise with or you can chat with, whether in person or virtually, but also searching out other groups and things. I have a Facebook group. I'm not sure if you have a Facebook group too. But these things can be helpful, especially if you feel like you don't really have anyone around you. It's seeking out some of these alternative options, then maybe you can meet someone closer to you, etc. But social support, I think, is huge because you can see, what other people have been able to accomplish, what's possible. It can be motivating because the journey is not always perfect. There are ups and downs, and there are, little bits of time that may be harder than others. And so having someone that you can kind of rely on is very, very helpful for that. And so I think all three of those topics are so important when it comes to just thinking about pain and how we perceive pain. And it's not all in your head, it's totally real, but it's impacted by a lot of different factors other than what's just structurally going on inside your joint. And I think that that's really huge. And I hope that this kind of changed your perspective on how we maybe approach pain and feeling a little more open-minded as far as exploring some other options, asking even your doctor, advocating for yourself about these other options, finding other healthcare professionals that can help address some of these more holistic options is definitely something that can help you if you're dealing with chronic pain and osteoarthritis in particular. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And if whoever is listening wants to find out more about you, where should they go?
So on social media, really easy, no matter what social media platform you follow, I'm at Dr. Joe Tatta.
Okay.
And my website is kind of long, but it's the Integrative Pain Science Institute.com, and you can find me there.
Perfect. I will put all of those down below. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. And I think that this was really, really helpful. And so thanks for listening or thanks for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, head down to the show notes or the description to check out those links. Thank you so much.
Thanks. It was great to be here.